Hello and welcome to an After Effects tutorial. I got a request to go over some of the effects from my Harry Potter video, and looking back on them, they're not very great, so I decided to redo a couple and make a tutorial on that. So today we're going to be going over this explosion here, and it's going to involve some tracking, motion tracking, some Action Essentials use, some compositing, and things like that. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and we are going to import our footage, so just kind of plop it in there. I'm using After Effects CS4. You can use any version pretty much. Anyway, so we're going to create a new composition, and I'm just going to drag this just to kind of get the section that I want. And okay, so we'll maybe end it about right here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Or maybe extend this just a little bit. Maybe right about there. Okay, perfect. So, I'm just gonna add this to the render queue, and we're gonna see composition, add to render queue, and we're gonna export this as a JPEG sequence so we can track it in Mocha. So, okay, JPEG sequence, destination, tutorial folder, JPEGs. Okay, so we're gonna quickly render this out, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so we're done tracking. And you can see here we have all our frames, and so we're going to open up Mocha. Mocha comes with After Effects, so if you have After Effects, you have Mocha. And Mocha's special because it's a planar tracker, as opposed to regular maybe point trackers. Like there's one built into After Effects over here with the tracker, where that tracks a single point, and you could maybe say find a high contrast point, like maybe this light over there or something, and it'll track that. Mocha tracks a whole section of your video. I'll show you in a second. So we're going to import our footage. I'll just grab the first frame and it'll import all of them. And then we'll go next, make sure it's the right length. Okay, that looks okay. And make sure that your frames per second, your FPS, is set. And I filmed this at 60 frames per second, which is actually 59.94. And so that's what we're going to choose. Well, I'm going to choose. Make sure that you know what frame rate you filmed yours at. Otherwise it won't track correctly. So we're going to finish that. And like I said, Mocha is a planar tracker. And that means that if we wanted to track something in this maybe grass area, which we do, we can, normally if you want to track something in there, you'd have to find a nice point to track. And because there's not really anything that pops out from this grass area, we couldn't track it that easily. So instead, we can use a program like Mocha, which will track a whole pattern. Like we can draw a box around this section, and it will track that whole section. So let's see. We want to track so the explosion tracks to the ground. So we're going to track a place where we think the explosion will be, which will be right about here. So we'll just draw a box around here, kind of generally matching the perspective of the area. Right-click to close it, close the shape, and so we'll just kind of say that looks about good. And we'll hit these buttons over here to track. So I'll just track backwards right now. So you can see that I went into the tracking area, this red kind of trapezoid here, briefly, but that's okay because Mocha knows, and Mocha's smart enough to know that it shouldn't grab onto my legs and track those instead, because we specified that we want just the grass to track. So now I'm going to track forward through the rest of the shot. And we're almost done, and we're done. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to go down here. We can just kind of scrub through. Yeah, it looks like a pretty good track. That red box is sticking to the area on the ground where we wanted it to. And so now we're going to hit export tracking data, and we're going to go up here and select transform data, and we're going to copy that to the clipboard. And now we're going to go over to After Effects, back into our composition, put our playhead at the beginning, layer, new, null object. What a null object is essentially an empty object. It's like a placeholder for data. So we can go edit and paste our After Effects transform data onto the null object. And so now we can hit U to see all of the data here. And so we can see then it has all our tracking data now. And I'm just going to uncheck the anchor point so we can move this null object around. And so if we just go a little bit further ahead, you will see that once we put this on the ground, kind of generally where our explosion is going to be, it will stick to the ground now. Actually, I'm going to move this over just a little bit more. Here we go. So it'll essentially kind of stick to the ground. Let's just move this just a little bit more, and you can see that it is now sticking to the ground just like we tracked. I'm just going to zoom this in here a little bit. Much better. And we can test this by, if we create some new text and, you know, we make it say, like, explosion, we can use this little swirly cue, whatever, swirly, curly cue thing. It's called a pick whip, and we can pick whip it to the null. So we basically said, hey, our explosion text, follow the null object. See, it's called parenting, so we parented the text to the null object, and so we say, hey, explosion, follow the null, your buddies now. So now he'll do whatever he does, or the explosion will do whatever the null does. Oops. And so the explosion text is now sticking to the ground where we would want, like, the explosion to be. We could drag this over. Oops. Hit V to go to your pointer tool. So you know it's sticking really nicely to the shot there. Anyway, we'll delete the text because we don't need that, and we will bring in some of our action essentials. Okay, so now back in After Effects, I've brought in some explosions, a dust wave, some dirt charges, the dark smoke, the puffy smoke, and a smoke charge from Action Essentials. And now we're going to start building our explosion. So here, maybe kind of where the explosion starts to go off, maybe right about there. Yeah, like right about there. We will drop in an explosion. And we'll kind of set it to start right there. I'm just going to put this below the null just to keep everything in order. Have the null on top so we always know where it is. And so we're going to, you know, place that kind of where we want it. And then we're going to parent that to the null so that it now moves along like it's sticking to the shot. We're going to move it up just a little bit. Yeah. And that is pretty big. We're going to scale it down just a teensy bit. And could go up just a little bit. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And you know, you could be just happy with that. I was for my first explosion round on the video, but I now know more about After Effects, and this is not good enough. What we really need is, you know, some smoke. So we'll drop that maybe behind the explosion and put it over there. And it's going really slowly, so we need to fix that. So we're going to go to Layer, Time Stretch, and this stretch factor basically is the percentage of time that you want it to take place in. So this clip is maybe like 20 seconds long, so the stretch factor is 100% is saying take place in the whole 20 seconds of the clip. We're going to set this to about 30, and so it's going to say take place in about 30 seconds. Or 30%, excuse me, 30% of your original time length. So now it's going to happen much quicker. So we're going to drag that over to maybe where the explosion starts, you know. And that looks about good placement for right now, so we're going to parent that to the null. And you can see it's going a lot quicker now. So that looks pretty decent. Except that it's extremely dark, so we're gonna slap some curves on that. Color correction, excuse me. I already used this effect, but you can go color correction, curves. And basically this is the light end over here, and this is the dark end of the picture. And so this is the highlights, so we can bring down the highlights. And there's not almost any highlights in this at all, so it doesn't really do anything. But we can bring up the dark end of the picture, and you see the black now turns to kind of a grayish color. But it's still kind of flat and uninteresting. There's not a lot of detail, so we'll just kind of tweak this. You know, there we go. We're starting to get some more detail in there, into that smoke. Okay, now that's looking pretty good. Maybe move it over just a little bit so it's a little bit more hidden behind the fire. Or no, put it like right there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we're gonna drag in some more smoke just to kind of. This is actually a 3D animated smoke. So we're gonna bring in some real smoke, this puffy smoke, and we're gonna place that back there and scale it down. It's pretty big, and like that, and parent that to the null again. And it came in way too early, so we're gonna move it back down a little bit. Maybe even further down. Kind of down here. The thing is that this is kind of a blue tint compared to this smoke. So we need to fix that. So we're gonna go Effect, Color Correction, Tint. And so you saw there, basically, it made it a grayscale. Just black and white. See, if we put the tint on our footage over here, just choose the same effect again, you know, it makes it black and white. But we don't want that, we just want it on this puffy smoke. So we're gonna unsolo this, solo maybe the puffy smoke, you can see it's black and white now. And so, now it matches in with that smoke much better. And you know, just kinda adds just a little bit something extra into that. Just a little bit more detail. So that's looking pretty good. But, you know, we want some dirt and stuff to be kicked up while we're doing this. I mean, an explosion just isn't only fire, it's actually, you know, grass and dirt and stuff flying up. So we're gonna grab one of these dirt charges, and, we're gonna put that, let's do it just behind the explosion over here. And, this is quite big, and quite early, oops. So we're gonna maybe, that's about good timing, we're gonna scale this down. But you can see we have this dirt kind of spill on the ground, so we're gonna solo that. And we're gonna only take the part of the element that we want. So, now we can subtract the mask, so it's only the part that we want. And feather it out just a little bit so it blends a little bit nicer. And we're gonna parent this to the null as well. So you can see there's kind of a little bit more of an explosion, and you know, some dirt, and we'll just drag another one on there. And same kind of deal. Mask around the parts that we don't want. Hit M for mask properties. Hit subtract, so we only have the part that we do want. And place this over here. Once again, parent it to the null, move it around. Is that about good timing? It's a little bit too much. Let's just scale it down. It's pretty big. You know, see later in the shot, there's some of these chunks, which makes it a lot more interesting and realistic. But, you know, we have this. Hit Command Shift H. You know, you can see it without all your little boxes and crap. Anyway, come over here. You know, it's looking pretty good. But we can, you know, maybe throw a little bit of color grading on our footage. Anyway, so we're going to add an adjustment layer, and we're going to put it below everything except our footage. Because an adjustment layer affects everything below it, but not above it. And we're going to go Effect, Color Correction, Curves. And here we're going to drop this down. I'm going to drop this down and just kind of bring everything down just a little bit. Well, this is kind of a lot, but we're going to kind of make it like that. You know, pop up some blue in here. We're going to bring down the red just a little bit. You know, now that's looking pretty good. It's kind of nightimey, or just kind of, you know, just a little bit more Harry Pottery, and the fire pops out a little bit more. But because it's dark, the scene now, we have to add some, you know, light spill from the fire. So we're going to create a new solid, layer new solid, and we're just going to kind of create this orangey color. And, you know, that's about good. We're going to hit OK. And we're going to come up here to the mask tool, and we're going to change it to the ellipse tool. And we're just kind of draw a circle around this fire. And we're going to, you know, just make it kind of a little bit more flat. Just kind of put it there, below the null again, above everything else though, and parent it to the null so it moves along with everything. And now it's looking like garbage, so we're gonna feather this out a whole bunch, drop the transparency. Now we kind of have that, a little bit like a glow on the ground. And, but it's there even before the fire comes on. And that's a problem. So we're gonna keyframe the opacity, hit T for opacity. So, no, we don't want the mask opacity, just regular opacity. So we're going to start it here at 0. Oops. And then when this kind of comes on, bring it up to about maybe like 44, 45%, something like that. And then as, oops, stop moving around, comp. And then as time goes on, we'll just drop it back down to like 10. So now we have, let's Command Shift H. Now we kind of have this glow effect that comes on. Still not very convincing, but I mean, it's better than nothing. Oh, I almost forgot. To tie all of these elements together, a good thing to use is one of these dust waves. If you look here, we'll just kind of hit the ellipse tool again and just kind of feather the edges so it blends a little bit better. But you know, just kind of kicks up a cloud of dust. Put that here. Start it whenever the explosion starts. Okay, so we have this dust wave here. Drop the feathering just a little bit. Scale it down, you know, a little bit. You can kind of see, place it in there, parent it to the null. And there we go. So we have this, and that's looking pretty cool. But you know, we want to add a little bit of flare. And I mean literally flare, like lens flare. So we're going to add a new adjustment layer. We're going to call it flare. Once again below the null. And we're going to go effect, generate a lens flare. And so for this, I would highly recommend getting Video Copilot's optical flares. I don't have it. I want to have it. They look amazing. And kind of everybody knows this default After Effects lens flare. We're just going to choose this one. You know, but we can work with it, even though it's not the best flare and it's kind of generic, and After Effects users will recognize it. We can kind of spruce it up and make it look pretty good. So we have this brightness slider here. I'm going to set that back at 100. And we want to keyframe the brightness as the explosion comes on. And we also want the flare to move where the explosion moves, like how we parented all the other things to the null. We want to parent the flare to the null. But see, that doesn't really work. I mean, it could work if we, move the flare. If we move the flare layer, though, it doesn't really do anything. The flare just kind of stays in the same place. But you can see the edges of the adjustment layer moving around. So that's not what we want. But what we can do is we can go down here to Effects, Lens Flare, and if we open up this null thing, we have this thing called Flare Center, which is what moves the flare. And so what we can do is we can Alt or Option click on the flare, and we get one of these, or the Flare Center, and we get one of these little pick whip things, and we can drag that to the position. And it says, hey, Flare Center, you're now buddies with the position. And so you're going to follow whatever the position does because he's cooler than you. And sure enough, it does that. And so you can see over here, the flare is now following the fire and the explosion. But, it's on here the entire time, so we want to keyframe the brightness. So we're going to hit the brightness thing up here, hit U to see all your keyframes, and so we're going to come over here, and we're going to set the brightness to 0, and we want to make sure this is maybe, we can maybe move this down here just a little bit more, and we want this to be really bright. We're going to, brighten this up. And that's maybe a little bit too bright. Let's bring it down to maybe 150-ish. Something like that. And then as this goes on, just kind of bring this back down to maybe 70-ish. And so we have this flare that comes on with the explosion and all the light being thrown off by the explosion. And this is kind of a good trick. Because this isn't a perfect explosion, you can kind of camouflage everything and make it blend a little bit better. So now we have this big flare that comes on and everything. And, that's all fine and everything, but our fire's orange and our flare is blue, so what can we do about that? Well, we can make a new adjustment layer and put it above the flare. We can maybe call this orangeness. I don't know if I even spelled that right. I don't really care either. Anyway, we're gonna slap another curves on here, and we're gonna up the red a whole bunch, maybe a bit like that, and then the green maybe just a little bit less, a little bit more, and we'll drop the blue a little bit. Kind of gives it that orangey feel. Maybe a little bit too much green down just a little bit. No, right about in there. That's looking pretty good. You can see now our flare and our whole shot has kind of turned a little bit orange, you know. It's orange over here because that's all below that thing. But that's okay, you know. It gives a little bit more realism to the fire over here. But it's really ugly at the beginning where there's even no fire. So we're going to keyframe the transparency again. So we're going to hit the stopwatch, turn it down to 0. Go to the point where the fire starts coming in. Turn that up. Even bring this in a little bit more. Bring that out. You know, so now it's all orange. And then kind of over here, we'll just drop this back down to like that. I don't know. And a little bit more. So now I'll just let me turn this down to half. You can see that it comes on with everything. And everything gets a little bit more orangey as the fire and everything comes on. And then as you know, everything gets a little bit less intense, the explosion goes on a little bit more and kind of dies down. The flare dies down and our orange color fades away. And so, you know, you can tweak this a little bit more. You know, you could add maybe a smoke charge in there. Or no, not the puffy smoke. Smoke charge in there. You know, behind everything. Maybe like that. Parent it to the null again. Kind of set up its timing. You know. Make it a little bit darker. Blend in a little bit better. Speed it up a little bit. Time stretch. Maybe like 75. You know, that's looking pretty good. So, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something. If you didn't learn something, I'm sorry. But I hope you did. Maybe a little bit something here and there. So, once again, like and subscribe to my channel for more of these and for more awesome videos with cool VFX, among other things. And I'll see you next time.